proposed warrant article to exempt the position of fire chief from the requirements of civil service. Chief?
Thank you,
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman. Good evening. What can I tell you don't already know? I can run through the capital outlay and give you our reasoning and where we're at with that right now. Let me get to the right page. I have it marked. Get in there. Man, there we go. I'll start with the aerial ladder. Just a brief history of where we're at. The one we presently have replaced in 1959, and most of you folks here probably remember that. It didn't even have a cab or heat in it. So in 1986, we purchased the one we have presently. It has served us well over the years, but as it approaches 24 years old at this time, it's becoming increasingly hard to keep it maintained. Every year we send it out for testing, and it comes back with, last year was over $15,000. It came back this year with a wish list from the manufacturer for repairs totaling probably about $40,000 just to keep it safe. Since that time, since 1986, I believe there have been 3 revisions through NFPA, which sets the standard for fire apparatus. And in that time, things such as a fully enclosed cab, climate control, increased tip loads. Just as a for instance, we have a rated tip load of 250 pounds that could be placed at the tip of this ladder under the most extreme conditions. Well, you put one firefighter out there in full gear, and he is 250 pounds anyway. And what we're looking for is, in the newer apparatus, what we're proposing would be 1,000 pounds. Also, it enables us to work a lot more safely, to work off of a roof or anything like that on a small. This thing is only about 18 inches wide at the top, and it's pretty limiting to try to get people up there and do what they need to do safely. So this will enable us to address the needs of the town as it has grown with the advent of the Avalons up on Evergreen Drive, Avalon Drive, 3-story buildings with lofts. Our ability to move hose lines through those buildings it's a challenge if we have to move it up the stairways. This piece of apparatus would have a basket or a bucket on it about the size of this table where you could put 2 firefighters. The waterway is piped right to the top, so we could go to a balcony. You can effect a rescue. You can also advance hose lines from that position. So as things change in town, building construction changes. Another example would be the new assisted living down at 90 West Street that Woodbriar is adding. In order for us to address those types of hazards that we have in town, a lot of those are high-life hazards. Some of the more, in recent memory, is the Peabody fire. Those condos, apartment styles that burned down there, it was just a cigarette from the outside that caught the mulch and totally destroyed the building. So our ability, we need the ability to be able to fight those type of things, and we have, we run pretty lean. In order to get the most from our people with the highest margin of safety, we need to advance the technology. So as time goes on, also, I think when we first looked at this about a year and a half ago, the price has gone up over $100,000 due to some of it is the economy and the price of steel and that sort of thing, but also every 5 years NFPA says, okay, now this vehicle has to meet this, whether it's engine braking or just certain criteria that need to be met, and those things cost money, and therefore it's just passed right along to us. They're talking another 7% increase for anything after this year here. So that's where we're at. Yeah. Any questions I can answer on that? Do you have anything?
What about the price of the aerial ladder? You didn't mention what the price would be.
Well, we're in, I'm sorry, it's, we have in for a 1.13, 1,130,000.
I'm sorry, 1 point what?
$1,130,000.
We have had some discussions recently, and the chief has indicated that he believes that number can become more competitive, and we're looking, more in the $1 million range, anywhere from 950 to 1 million. So that number may be a little high at this point, and we'll have the luxury of being able to determine it because we're intending to borrow, to issue debt. So we'll be able to know exactly what we're looking at once we get a little closer to a bid process.
If I could, Chief, Mike, I know in years past, serving on the board for a while, I know in years past, like when the planning board would approve something, sometimes there'd be a little negotiation. Like, for example, Avalon Oaks, or one time I think it was Coffee Graphic, they had, what, a 4-story or 5-story building that they may kick in a portion of money towards, a fire apparatus. For example, you mentioned the healthcare facility. I know years ago, healthcare facility would maybe donate an ambulance, frontline ambulance. Is there any talk at all with the new facility that's down at the end of Lowell Street that maybe, I'm not saying we're kicking in, but obviously they're going to be looking for our services, and I don't know if there was any talk at anywhere point in time, or if it's not too late, to maybe some of these new facilities that are moving into town to see if there's some type of, given the restraints of our budget and what's going on, and maybe they can kick in some money towards us because it's going to benefit them in the long run. Benefits all of us, but them is more so.
Absolutely, we have not had any conversation, but we are looking to do this as economically as possible. And one of those that I've spoken with the manager about is to explore some of these. We're not hung up on one manufacturer. Obviously, we're going to get the best value we can for the dollar, but some of these folks have vehicles that they produce that they take around to trade shows and that sort of thing. So if something like that's available, it's kind of off the lot. You do a little bit better than having one built. But I would anticipate we're not going to just take what they throw at us. Part of this is also this needs to come fully equipped. Most of the equipment on this thing is 23, 24 years old, and actually some of it came from the 1959 ladder truck. So as we move forward, this is equipment as well.
Okay.
Anything else?
I know we can't count on it, but I'm assuming the old truck, if we get the new one, it would go into like an auction of some kind. I understand that we can't count on that money, but it would be, other communities would, I assume if they can't afford a new one, they might think the value of that truck to spend $40,000 on that. Is that how that works? If we do get the new one, would it be auctioned off? What would happen to the old one?
We can include it as a trade and determine what you get for a trade, but usually it's not very much. You don't usually get too much, but that would be a component where we would include that in the bid specs just to see what would happen. If that doesn't work out, and the chief and I haven't had a lot of discussion about this, but I assume we would then just go to auction. I don't think there's any need for or maybe there is. Do you? I don't know if you
I think if we had a place to house it and that sort of thing, it would be great in a perfect world to have it as a spare, but it would need a lot of money thrown at it. There are, with this economy, actually, some outfits that have sprung up that specifically take apparatus such as this, and they will sell it on a commission-type basis, and that's their specialty, so that's something else we can look into.
One of the things I will mention is at the MMA conference a couple of Saturdays ago, there were some folks there who are getting into the business of doing a lot of these auctions through the internet, and they're finding that they're getting a much wider range of bidders and prospective bidders for vehicles and other old equipment. As you know, we typically will conduct every year we'll conduct a vehicle auction through the Department of Public Works that is usually held, I think, in October or thereabouts in the fall. It's just we're looking at whether or not we would be better off doing something through this auction service where there's no cost of advertising, but we're talking with them just to see whether or not that would be a better deal. But, yeah, we're leaving all of our options open, Charlie, but it doesn't appear as though there's going to be any need to retain it for the reasons the chief indicated, and we'll try to get the most we can for it. I don't think there's a big market for a used ladder truck. I don't know if you believe any of the smaller communities would be interested in this kind of vehicle, but
It's possible. I mean, anything is possible, but I mean, possibly even could leave the country,
yeah, Mexico or something like that, yeah.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Yeah, you would think with all of the standards changing, as the
Right.
chief has indicated, that we'll have to go a little bit further to find a market for it, but I could see the internet-type auctions certainly helping that out. Anything else on that one from the board?
Okay. The other capital outlay item that we have would be to replace the current second-line ambulance, and just a little history there with that. This one was purchased, it is a 2001 or 2000, and we purchased it in 2001 when we had an accident with our frontline ambulance at the time, and we were in a position where we didn't have anything that was in reserve that we could bring up to the front line and run, so we actually had to borrow an ambulance for the better part of a month so that we could provide service in town. So this was purchased off the lot, and we did pretty well with it. It served us well, but it has got to a point where we've put a lot more pressure on it, probably for the last, I believe, about 20 months now. We've been running 2 ambulances, and so this one isn't technically a backup. This one runs second out the door. We, I believe, last year had about 400 instances where this, and it's about once or twice a day, depending on, but the average would be a little better than once a day that this thing responds to the second call that we get while the first line would be tied up. Also, if the first line ambulance is down for any time for maintenance or anything like that, this moves right up into the front line. And it's got to the point where we're starting to have some pretty major maintenance issues, and it just gets to the point where it isn't serviceable anymore in that capacity. So what we'd like to do is replace that and then get on a schedule where we have something that's in the second slot that's more serviceable and able to take the pressure of more constant running as our runs do increase. And that the price tag on that is about $180,000. Again, we're going to do the best we can to trim that if we can.
These funds would be through the regular operating budget. This would not be financed by debt. And Chief, could you just mention so this new ambulance, if it's approved at town meeting, would become the new frontline ambulance, and the current frontline ambulance would become the backup, replacing the ambulance the Chief just spoke about. And what is the year for the current frontline ambulance?
The current ambulance now will be we will have it 2 years in July. Presently has about 40,000 miles on it. By the time we get this out to bid and get it, it'll be in excess of 2 years old. And what we'd like to see is that move to the backup position, and then in 2 years come again and try to keep the one that's in reserve in that 2 to 4 year range, so that we have something that's dependable and serviceable. And again, same things happen with regulations and codes and that sort of thing. It constantly evolves. Technology evolves now, and it's happening. It's happening with us. And as our run load increases, the need for that thing to be there when we need it.
I think this would put us in the best shape we've probably ever been in terms of the newness, if you will, of both ambulances overall.
And we are in a unique situation where we have been providing that second out the door. Just as a point of reference, I believe it was 4 years ago, we had incoming 432 times we had medical aid come into the town from neighboring cities and towns, Woburn, to help us out. Last year that was down to under 90. So we're handling those in-house now. So that puts that added pressure and takes the pressure off the folks around us. And when it's mutual aid, I suppose it's they're not doing 25% of your business, so we've done a lot better with that.
Any questions from the board?
Okay, and again, that would become fully equipped, that equipment sees a lot of use. The third item is something that's mandated by the state of Massachusetts, that we have the ability to report to them all of our EMS runs electronically. This isn't something that we can do anything about. The implementation was initially scheduled for September of 2008, and they've pushed it off to September of 2009. And we have been interviewing several vendors. It's a purchase of software and hardware, and it allows the ambulance billing situation to become a lot more streamlined. What we've been finding is our collection rate isn't probably what we would really like it to be, and part of that problem is we do it on paper. These trip reports come back, they're checked by the shift officer, then they go into admin, and they get mailed down to town hall, and they get mailed to our billing agency. Problem is, with the insurance companies, especially on a motor vehicle accident, if you're 2 weeks getting your bill in, the hospital has already had their bill in, 4 or 5 hours after they've seen the patient, and there's not that much left for us to collect. So this should enhance our ability to at least make that collection rate a little bit better on that end. So it's a hardware, software, and training that we need to do here. And again, this is this price is based on interviews that we've had with actually 3 vendors at this point.
Questions or comments? Good. And the position of chief and the civil service requirements.
Okay, in discussions with the town manager, we've come to a situation where it's actually pretty unique. I've been with the fire department in one capacity or another since 1972. And over the course of the years, I think I've worked for 3 chiefs. And at that time, there always were enough candidates that were willing and, I guess, able to take the civil service test. We did not get enough folks to sign up or to commit to take the test that would be held actually on March 21st. Out of the 8 people that were available, I was the only one that signed up for the test. Therefore, it's postponed for another year, which would be March of 2010. And civil service mandates at that point that this test be open to the entire department. That's the civil service mandate, I guess. That's what that's where you go from there. Assuming we got enough folks to take it in 2010, we would then appoint from that list. If we don't, I believe it opens up statewide after that. And I think that in fairness to everyone, the town included, that and I'm sure that we have firefighters with the credentials that probably could pass this test, but I believe that it would be not in the best interest of the town if you promoted somebody directly from firefighter to chief without having any intermediate supervisory or managerial experience at all. So for that reason, we have proposed this warrant article. Some of the contiguous towns that have also done the same would be Andover, North Andover, Burlington, Lexington, and across the state, it's becoming more of the norm that the cities and towns can choose from a wider field of candidates. It doesn't mean that you don't maybe get your best candidate from in-house, and it provides a degree of accountability that you don't have as a governing body with the civil service system.
add that I absolutely agree with the chief's assessment. I think it would be really unfair to the town and to the department if we were forced to hire an individual without any real management, supervisory, or command experience in the fire department. This is not to be interpreted as an ill reflection on the firefighters. We have some very competent firefighters, and I can tell you that I think some of those firefighters will make fine chiefs someday. I think there are some folks that are right now in the ranks that I could look down the road many years from now, when whoever is going to be making decisions on appointments at that time, and they would probably do well to consider those individuals. But at this point in time, I don't think it would be in the best interest of the town to not have somebody become chief that has at least been in a command role, supervising other firefighters. I think that would cause a problem for the town. And unfortunately, because there was no other interest among the eligible candidates within the department, we've been put into the situation where we now have that risk. And the chief is actually would have to take the test as well, and of course is not guaranteed anything one way or another. So this is certainly a risk that he takes, and I applaud him for being willing to put the interests of the department ahead of even himself. So I think this makes sense, and I would hope that the community sees that it makes sense as well. Many of the other communities that the chief has mentioned have just taken this step because they believe it's the right thing to do. We're talking about a major department head here, and we're talking about limitations in terms of the numbers that we can select from. And so many of these other communities felt very strongly that they should have a larger universe. And I think there's some merit to that as well. But certainly at this point, I think we would be actually handcuffing ourselves if we didn't move to make this kind of a move.
I know that the chief had mentioned was it 8 other eligible
Including myself, right?
members of the department who are in some sort of supervisory or managerial position, command position. Can you just, for folks who maybe aren't quite familiar with civil service, talk about the basic limitations on the appointing authority in terms of the exams, the top 3 and all that stuff? Because I think we're maybe assuming some folks understand that when
Right,
might not be the case.
You would typically have to pick from one person from within the top 3. And so if the top 3 in this case were all firefighters, based upon, the ability to pass an examination, then I would, unless we were able to prove to civil service that there was something inherently wrong with the individual, which, that person wouldn't be working if there was, we would be forced to select among the top 3. It's pretty, I'm not aware of any instances where you've been able to go beyond the top 3 on a promotional exam. That changes, of course, if this were a lieutenant that we were hiring, then you would be taking from the ranks of the firefighter. If you're hiring 2 lieutenants, then civil service says you can take from among the top 5. In any case, anytime you veer from the top person, you have to give a very valid reason. So civil service really says you should take the first person on the list, but you can give a valid reason as to why you wouldn't take the first or second person, and you could take the third, but under no circumstances are you going to be able to go beyond that.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board?
I just briefly, no disrespect to you, Chief, or to the town manager, and I understand, and it's definitely fully disappointing that nobody signed up for it. There's no question about that. I'm just looking way down the road, probably after both of you and myself might be retired on the
Our next regularly scheduled appointment, which had been scheduled for 7:20, is with George Hooper, Superintendent of Public Buildings. It's regarding a discussion of the FY 2010 capital building project requests, including a fire alarm system improvements at the Wildwood and Shawshene schools, window replacement at the Shawshene School, chairlift installation at the West Intermediate School, and the demolition of the Swain School, and then also a discussion of town-wide energy savings program. Mr. Hooper, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Town
Chairman,
Manager.
may I interrupt before
Yes.
Mr. Hooper goes? It's my era. The other item that Mr. Hooper will be talking about is the replacement of the flooring, which isn't listed here at the Woburn Street School. I apologize for not having included that.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm sure you've got a list of these things in front of you. These here projects were actually outlined from a last year master plan study that Dory Whittier did for the town.